Greetings, my bookworms. Today I'm going to do something very special for you guys. I'm very sorry for not uploading for a while. I've been very busy with a summer internship. Maybe I'll do a video on that. I want to try something highly experimental today. Now I have no idea if this is going to work, but I'm so behind on my book reviews that I am literally going to do a lightning round with 8 book reviews in one. Now, I have no idea if this will be very short, where I just give brief synopsises, or very long. But we will see where this goes. So let's get ready for the lightning round. These are our first 4. These are our next 4. We're not going to go in any particular order. We're just going to do it. So, it's time for lightning book round. Now, if I was a better paid channel or a news channel, we play some sort of sound effects, but we don't have time for that, and we don't have the resources. So you can just imagine it. This is the first one, Generation of Sociopaths, how the baby boomers destroyed America. It's incredibly controversial. The title automatically pisses people off. It is a very interesting book, a very interesting idea, and personally, my understanding coming into this book was it was the rich who stole America's future. And quite frankly, that's still true. But this basically states how the baby boomers were complicit and how they were like, we need to preserve what we have at the expense of everyone else. Very similar to what you expected. They put in policies restricting the home supply solely so that they could ride the value of their home until they die, even though home property values increasing brings absolutely nothing if you don't intend to sell it. But at the same time, it's understandable because, a lot of your net worth is locked in your home, so it's understandable why people would protect it. But at the same time, screwing their children and young people out of housing until they die is not exactly a sustainable policy. So it really explains things more. It has a lot of charts and graphs showing how the marginal tax rate for the top earners went down, how the boomers came up with the idea, how the boomer revolution started a while ago and finished with Reagan, and then Clinton just nailed in some more nails into their dead corpse or into the coffin with more neoliberalism. And it makes a very interesting case that salaries, both average and in general, are 20% lower than they would be if the boomers didn't do this policy. So anywho, I thought it was a good book. I'm going to put this in the recommend column. I think I got it from some used bookstore somewhere. I don't know where. I would highly recommend buying it from, thrift books or something. I mean, it's actually one of the few books in which I can say that paying $27 for it new would be worth it. But it's usually better to support a small local used bookseller, or bearing that, a national used bookseller on the other side of the country through thrift books or A books or something, than it is to, buy from Amazon, even if it's an independent seller, or, go to a big chain. On the other hand, Barnes & Noble really needs our help. But, so, I'd get it. I'd pick it up. At some times it was a bit slow to read, and it basically makes the argument that there's a huge bill that will come due, and that we'll have to, invest a large chunk of money to fix what the boomers screwed up. Like $10 trillion or something, and quite frankly, the sad part is that that's true. So I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. At some points, there were not enough graphs, not enough figures, and at some points it was a bit slow going. But yes, I'm going to recommend A Generation of Sociopaths, How the Baby Boomers Destroyed America by Bruce Cannon Gibney. Now, next part of the lightning round. Socialism seriously. And no, that's not a sarcastic, oh, socialism's garbage. No, it's like a serious guide, and it's titled Socialism Seriously, A Brief Guide to Surviving the 21st Century Now with 50% More Socialism by Danny Catch. It's published by Haymarket Books, and I picked up this copy at the DSA National Convention in Chicago a bit ago, the last one, and paid, only got like a 10% discount because I bought kind of in bulk. Anywho, I ended up spending like $300 there, so like, you know, it was expensive. I really like supporting a small independent book seller, and so far the DSA stack has been very good in terms of finding it actually interesting and well worth reading. So we're going to go into this one now. This one is interesting because it basically talks about a bit about the history and theory, but I thought it was more interesting in that it actually presented like, oh, here's what would happen if America took this turn and how things would be better. So it's like, so it has like almost like stories from the future, if that makes sense. So it's like one of the chapters is like, I woke up in the morning in my house share. The government had instituted a policy where people could share their living spaces with anyone they wanted. I talked to my uncle, who was very pro-capitalist and was imprisoned for his illegal profiteering as a business owner, and he is the most critical of the government's amnesty towards prison abolition, but ironically, he got his sentence commuted, and then it goes, I ride a high-speed public train to public high-speed rail to work, and today, as part of the job share, I'm helping communally grow food in urban gardens. It's a very interesting look, and it's also contained a decent bit of theory, and it's very digestible with a very short number of pages. So I think it comes out to, let me just check the page count for you guys. And then it contains strategies at the end of how to get there, of 221 pages. Yeah, I paid roughly $18 plus tax for the discount. If you order an indie book like this, I would highly recommend you just pay full price. Like, if you order through them, like, they're pretty generous with giving like a 10 or 20% discount. It's only like $17.95, and it's an independent press publisher who does small runs, so it's very important to support them. And, you know, they don't really make much money off of it, and the authors get a decent chunk, and, you know, and $18 for a book is generally pretty cheap anyway. I mean, like, the price of a new book is usually hovering around 20 or $30. So, I mean, I'm sure you could probably find someone reselling their copy for cheap, but this is one of those instances in which I bought a new book, which is very rare nowadays because of how high new book prices are. It's usually sometimes reward or when there's no other option. So, personally, if you're severely struggling and have to buy it used, like, it's suboptimal, but you should do that, especially if the choice is not reading it. But ideally, everyone should just buy it new to help support the publisher and the author. So I'm going to give this one, honestly, a 4.8. 4.8 out of 5, and the sole reason being I wish it was longer. It was so good, but it was also so short. So now let's move on to the next book in the lightning round. Can't Pay, Won't Pay, by The Case for Economic Disobedience and Debt Abolition, Debt Collective. It doesn't really say who it's by. My guess is it's a group of authors, Debt Collective, and then it has a foreword. Again, from the same publisher, PM Publishing. And it's very interesting. And basically it talks about how the fact that we're heavily indebted is actually a bit of a benefit, because quite frankly, if every American simply said I'm not paying my student loans, the government would simply have no choice but to wipe the debt, if that makes sense. And it also talks a lot about the history of debt, and how for a large chunk, the old slogan is always about, if you owe the bank $1 million, that's your problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion or $1 trillion, that's the bank's problem. Basically saying that and quite frankly, when people band together, well, let's just say when people band together, corporate power often falters. During the 80s farm crisis, this is not in the book, by the way, just an interesting aside. During the 80s farm crisis, there was a small town in South Dakota in which a well-known and well-liked farmer, he had fallen behind on his payments because of the Reagan administration, or because of the farm crisis, and the bank came to foreclose on him. I have no idea how bank foreclosure agents were so happy, because in a lot of parts of rural America, people have signs saying, "Show up on my property, you get shot." And he was this close away from getting shot, and he actually got evicted with a shotgun. Anywho, so what ended up happening is the entire town stopped paying their mortgage and said, now you can either wipe this debt clear, or you can foreclose on all of us, in which case people aren't buying farms right now because of the crisis. Do you really want that? Anywho, the bank ended up forgiving all the loans. So it's also interesting how they talk about how the productivity and workers' compensation has shifted, and how financial planners often come up with all sorts of stupid proposals that are literally impossible for how you can balance your debt. This one literally has people working 100 hours a week, or how like there was this well-known, well-respected financial planning guy on television who said that as an executive, who somehow believed that McDonald's employees were making six figures a week with a $15 minimum wage, because I guess financial people are just stupid and illiterate and innumerate. But anywho, it was just kind of an example of out of touch. They also mention how some people in the Treasury Department, like fucking Steve Mnuchin, were like, yeah, the $2,000 payment will last 10 weeks. And this is also a disturbing part, which apparently I completely forgot about. Apparently, a lot of people have debt from being in prison, like bail debt. Like, in some instances, people end up getting charged fees to be in prison. Like, that makes no sense and probably shouldn't even be legal. So anywho, this one was a very interesting book. And it talks about how if we don't stop the power of the wealthy, they'll own everything and we'll live in an even worse shithole, which is definitely true. And it also talks about how we need to essentially use this for reparations to help, indigenous people, African Americans, pretty much everyone, honestly. I really think, like, it's class analysis towards, like, middle class and small business owners. They basically just forgot about them. It's probably not particularly good. But anywho, I really like this, and yeah, you should probably buy it. Apparently, you can purchase it from haymarketbooks.org or Consortium Book Sales and Distribution. It's also printed with union labor and with responsible paper. So I thought this was a very interesting book, and it's got a lot of recommendations, including, like, Rashida Tlaib mentioning it. So I really like this book. Again, my problem is it didn't go so much into class analysis as I would like. It was short. I feel like there was more that could have been made. But for a book that effectively has a collective authorship, which is an interesting concept. I would say it's probably really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it, I'm going to say a 4.5 out of 5 with a recommendation to purchase. And here's the next book, Class Struggle Unionism, also from Haymarket Books. So this one was very interesting, and I really picked it up because I was getting more involved with the labor movement. It's a very interesting book. It talks about, like, the history of how unions went from, like, being, I'm going to assault the boss and fight for socialism, to, can we get a 15% raise this year? Which I feel like is a very important story to be told. And then it also talks about how basically the CEOs, yeah, they have to move numbers around, they have to do technically important stuff, and their job is a job, and some CEOs do work 80 hours a week. But the fact is that they're not worth 5,000 times or 300 times the wage of the workers they employ, and quite frankly, a lot of management is either useless or counterproductive. And sadly, there's been a lot of CEOs recently in the U.S. who've run their companies into the ground through private equity, gotten their golden parachute, and moved on. Like, if you run your company into the ground, you honestly should have your money, you should have your parachute taken. The workers and people under you should get first dibs on any assets. And quite frankly, there should be an investigation on whether you're incompetent or a fraudster. But anywho, that's neither here nor there. So I thought it was interesting how it, like, analyzed how some labor members went from fighting the good fight to supporting Trump, or how how there's always been some of a strain of straight up racism and racial and ethnic exclusion from certain parts of the labor movement. It was a very informative read, and it does do a lot of class analysis mixed with history. And I thought it was interesting because it said that as more and more unions, their front staff is just college-educated people with labor studies degrees and stuff. And as there's more and more professionals, people become more and more disconnected towards the people they're leading. And I can't necessarily say I disagree. You should have as much in common with the people you're leading as well. But at the same time, I'm also a bit of a hypocrite on the issue. I've been involved with the labor movement. I have an associate's degree. I'm working on a bachelor's degree in political science. And so it's not like I'm not biased on this issue. So I can kind of get what he's trying to say, and I definitely understand that more people should be down in the trenches with the guys. But I also feel like the labor movement needs every single person it can get. So I think this is an interesting and illuminating read. You should definitely read it, if only because it's a opposition perspective or a challenge to your own opinions from the left side. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 solely, and a recommend, but less strongly on buying, because again, great to learn about, like, the history of the movement and how labor is becoming disconnected from its roots. But I also worry that it might alienate supporters of labor who might otherwise want to help. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 and be a little bit less strong on the buy. Not quite to borrow it from a library or friend, but it's interesting and you should read it. But I'm also not as I still think I got a steal for $18 or whatever it was with the 20% discount, but I'm going to be a little less strong on the recommend. The next book, this one's been circulating around for a long time. A People's Guide to Capitalism, Introduction to Marxist Economics. This one I think was on the bestseller list and stuff. It's literally just explaining basic theory and basically how and basic economics from a left-wing perspective. Not particularly groundbreaking, a bit updated on how like Donald Trump and class concerns are focusing, and how the workers always pay for whatever bad decisions the company makes. So it's well worth a read, even if it's just basic stuff you've already heard a million times. It's also great to lend to your friends who have no understanding of the concept or want a basic introduction. It cost me like $20. It was from Haymarket Books. Honestly, on this one, it's not necessarily as good because I already know things in it. I already know most of it, but it was an easy and quick read, nice refresher course. Definitely beats rereading like couple thousand of Marxist texts. So it's 244 pages. Honestly, it's also good enough from a basic perspective that to anyone who's ever like right-wing but questioning their ideology or questioning economics or something, it's honestly something that you should gift to people. Like, it's $20 a pop, it's cheap, there might be a way you might be able to ethically get a used copy. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 solely because it was very basic. Next book in the lightning round, Ecosocialism, A Radical Alternative to Capitalist Catastrophe by Michael Lowy. So this one was very interesting because it was a basic primer of eco-socialism, if that makes sense. I thought the ideology was interesting and wondered how the red and the green came together, and had read a Wikipedia article on it. So I thought this one was interesting because of being, pretty basic, a very short, easy primer to read, like with the back notes on like couple resolutions at the UN and stuff, and the appendixes. It comes out to 103 pages, so you could probably knock it off in like just over an hour. And it's well worth a read, but it's also to anyone who's thought about the economy and climate change for more than 2 seconds, pretty basic. So capitalism caused the crisis. Basically, the fact that you could make more money burning oil and fossil fuels to fuel the economy is why we did it. So it caused the crisis, and the people who are rich because of the crisis. And the mainstream opinion is that we should give them more money or invest money in the same group of capitalists to fix the mess they created. And the idea is that the solution to a problem caused by capitalism is capitalism. And it also mentions a bit about the wasteful consumption of the rich and how ultimately resources should be distributed by like resource boards who make democratic control decisions. So it was a basic primary. It was very easy. Honestly, I'm still not 100% convinced, but I also think it is, worth a read. I'm still some flavor of left, either social democrat or like democratic socialist or some form of that. But I still haven't really found myself there yet. So I think I've also just been reading things from all sorts of perspectives, and I think this is probably worth a read. It's Haymarket Books. It's $19. For such a small book, honestly, $19 is expensive, even with the 10 or 20% discount. So it's also So, I mean, it's a bit hard on the every single used book you buy apparently hurts the people who publish the book, like the author, because they don't make any money off of a used sale. But at the same time, it's better for the environment, and honestly, I'm gonna put this in the maybe pile. If it's on your list and you have an easy chance to pick it up, um, honestly, it depends on the price. $19 is a bit steep. If you have the money or you have the disposable income, you might as well. If not, maybe a used copy or the library. So, because of shortness and because I always wanted more and really feel like it was just a basic intro, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars. Then the next one, the Socialist Challenge Today. Again, same group, Haymarket Publishers. It has an intro word from Jeremy Corbyn, and that was very interesting. It really talks about how, like, democratic socialism and the DSA plus, like, the rise in left-wing politics in Europe and stuff are interconnected. And it talks about how, like, in the US, the left really started with the New Deal and how the New Deal was an attempt to save capitalism from itself. So yeah, it's very interesting. It talks about how and why the challenge, how and why things went unraveled, how Sanders fizzled out, how labor lurched to the right. Then it talks about how to build the movement, how you should plan, so on and so on. It's very interesting, if only because it's a snapshot in time and kind of mixed in with a little bit of action. It's 109 pages, so it's really short, so if you purchase it, you can finish it quickly. Like, that must have taken me like an hour and 40 minutes, maybe 2 hours. It also mentions how the Green Deal is not enough, because quite frankly, most plans for climate change have never been enough. And it talks about how worker ownership is not necessarily the solution, because, for example, if, say, the people who drilled oil, the blue-collar guys, owned the oil company, they wouldn't stop oil drilling. And it also mentions how class unity is important, and union strength is the most important, and that eventually capitalism will basically implode under its own weight because of the fact of depleting resources, gradually knocking out the middle class, so on and so on. And it suggests creating planning boards for distributing resources due to climate change and closed factories and such. It was $12.95, which is really cheap. So this one is probably going to be go straight into the highly recommend solely because of the price and because it's a nice intro. Buy this one directly from the publisher. Help support independent left-wing political thought. The next one is No Planet B. This one I picked up on a whim. I was a bit less sure of it. Honestly, thought it would be. A Teen Vogue Guide to the Climate Crisis, No Plan B. Interesting title. I'm a youth climate activist. I've been one since I was like 12. I thought it was interesting hearing the voices of people aged 10 to 25. At the same time, I wasn't necessarily sure how simple the narratives would be, how good that the collection of essays within it would be. Because when you get a book of left-wing essays, generally speaking, it's a mixed bag. It's either really good or really terrible, and there's no in between. Sorry if that's a burn on our community. I'm just being a bit honest. So, ultimately, some of the essays were hard to read because, sometimes that's really how things are. Some of the essays will always be very technical or, unreadable, or you'll struggle to understand it, or you'll think that this is a stupid thing to write. And quite frankly, that's fine. We're a movement of many different movements. we're never gonna 100% agree on each other, and the left-wing firing squad eating itself is sadly a potential problem. So it's 220 pages, it's short, but I also found some of the ones hard to get through, if that makes sense. Some of the essays were hard to read. So even though it was short, it took me a while to read it, if only because there were points in which I'm like, what do I have to complete this essay? So honestly, on this one, I recommend buying it, reading it through one way, and then just sampling it bites at a time, if that makes sense. It's 16 bucks. It's from Haymarket Books. I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. There's some problems with readability. There's some problems with some of the essays being long and boring. There's some problems with, there's some problems with it being both too short and too long at the same time, if that makes sense. So some of the essays feel like they drag on forever, and others end right when they get good, so you almost wish there were more essays in it. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5, which is just barely passing. If it's a 3 or under, it goes to the do not recommend, or immediately donate this one to charity and write a video warning you guys. So I'm not sure I would pay full price for this, honestly. This is up to you guys' discretion, but normally pirating books is generally pretty good. But you're harming a small market publisher, a small market left-wing publisher. Like, who else is gonna publish our manifestos? Who else is gonna help us with this type of thing? I don't know, just food for thought. So this has been the lightning book round. We've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've gone through 8 books in 32 minutes. To any of you guys who are still here, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.